He's a excellent YouTuber, a great game dev. He's been working on a game called Will You Snail. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Jonas?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks a lot for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you for
And
coming.
yeah, basically, I've been making games for a long time now. I studied game design in Berlin for a while now. I have a YouTube channel where I document my game dev journey, and I created a game called Islanders with two of my friends at university, which did pretty well on Steam. And now I'm creating an indie game alone called Will You Snail, which is hopefully coming out this year. Let's see. Yeah.
Always like have to push it. Well, you want it perfect. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, making a game alone just takes a lot more time. Like as I've said, we made Islanders in a team of 3. That just for some reason we finished that project so quickly. Like looking back at it, it seems really strange that we managed to do that in
Like
such a
it's
short amount of time.
such a complex game to be able to finish it so small.
No, not really. It's not really a complex game. I guess that was that's probably what we did right. We kept it really simple, but keeping it simple is one of the hardest things when making a game. Like
You just want to keep adding different
you
mechanics.
have so many ideas. You want to keep adding new stuff to it constantly. And then, of course, if you have a community on YouTube or playtesters who play your game, they have a lot of ideas and requests what should make it into the game. So there's like even more thing you kind of want to put in there.
How do you decide like how to filter that out?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's really tricky, especially once you get very emotionally attached to your game, and once you get starting a little nervous about releasing your game. I almost feel like it's some sort of self manipulation where you're like, oh, I'm too nervous about releasing this game, so how about I just don't and keep working on it for a while longer. Yeah, so
Then you keep it in your keep it to yourself too long. Yeah,
that's probably a big reason as well why it takes a lot of developers as long as. I mean, same story for me, pretty much.
Yeah, you just want it perfect. When did you said you've been doing it a long time? How long ago is a long time when you started game dev?
Oh, I started game dev when I was like 10, 11, 12, something like that. I started making games with Game Maker back then. I used to make little games out of paper, little board games, and pretended that they were video games. And then at some point, my dad introduced me to Game Maker, and I loved it. I kept making games for a long time. Then, for some reason, I thought I wanted to become a filmmaker. Lost track of my game development goals a little bit, and now I guess everything's coming back together with YouTube and game development at the same time. I've definitely found a nice sweet spot for now. Not sure if I'll keep doing this forever, but yeah, it works at the moment, so I'm happy with it.
Right, you got the film quality YouTube videos. That's pretty. I mean, that's basically filmmaking on its own, right there. That's pretty nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I started the YouTube channel 3 years ago. When I got started, the videos were pretty cringe, to be honest. But they, luckily, over the course of the last 3 years, they got a lot better, and I obviously hope they'll keep getting better for a while.
Definitely. What do you attribute like them getting better to? Just practice, or how do you refine your style in a way?
A lot of it is just taking more time for each video. So at the beginning, I uploaded daily, which obviously you can't make a good video in just one day. So now I'm like at a point where I upload like every 3 weeks or maybe even just once a month, and that way I can spend an entire week on a video instead of a few hours.
Right.
And that obviously makes a huge difference. But obviously you keep learning as well. There are a lot of things, or a lot of ways you can sort of become more efficient. For example, one thing I discovered recently that really I feel like increased the quality of my videos a lot is sound effects. I discovered that you can purchase sound effects and then use them in all of your future videos, and they actually make videos so much better. It's not a lot of work. You just buy them once, put them in the videos at the correct place, and it just makes everything feel and sound so much juicier.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you bought like a sound effect asset pack kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You can use them for your games too, potentially. So.
Yeah, you could. Sure. I use a lot of sound effects from my games in the videos as well sometimes. So when text pops up or something like that, having a little
No, yeah,
whatever.
I think that's my hardest part is I'm always trying to use the free sound effects. I never even thought of purchasing them. I'm like, there's so many free sound effects out there, but they're not the
Yeah, yeah,
quality. They're not the quality.
yeah. You get a lot more quality when you're willing to put a little bit of money on the table. But actually they're relatively cheap sound effects. They're really good. You just have to, I guess, keep looking for them. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to university for game dev, or you're graduated, or
No, I quit halfway through
well.
my studies. It was a great school. Like I studied at HTW Berlin, and I can highly recommend that school. Like they did absolutely nothing wrong. It was mostly my own impatience and the fact that I realized that like the normal games industry is not for me. That made me quit my studies there. The fact that I realized that like the normal games industry. So yeah, so I basically did an internship in a games company.
Huh.
A very nice company as well. Like only lovely people making great games. But for some reason, like it didn't click for me. So
Do you
yeah.
think it helped it helped at least like kind of understanding more about game development and kind of like the
Yeah,
every
for
general
sure.
area?
Yeah. I think it did. Yeah.
So, and most of your games, it looked like I looked at your portfolio. It looked like a lot of your games were published through like kind of as university projects, right?
Uh, yeah, some of them. I'm not sure which games I have in my portfolio.
Oh, so
Probably two or three of them. Yeah. So Cake Shift and Obscure, I think, are other university projects as well.
yeah, those look pretty cool.
Yeah,
Honestly.
Basically, the university was relatively hands off, which is actually one of the things I really liked about studying there. They just gave you nice equipment to work with, a lot of inspiration, good tips, and time to make games.
I
Pretty
feel
much
you.
all you need. Yeah,
Does
it's
it
nice.
was it odd? Like, did you work on a team before you went there? Have you worked on like a game dev team before that?
Yeah, I've worked on a team before. Yeah, I made a little mobile game for the phone, which is not even on the App Store anymore because if you don't update the game for a while, it just gets removed automatically. So unfortunately, it's gone now. But yeah, as I've said, I made some games before, and I've also made some small or even bigger team projects before. So yeah, university wasn't the first time where I did that. No.
Do you find it better, I guess, easier working solo or with a team?
If you ask me now, if I could choose, I would always choose working in a team over working alone. But I guess it's the hierarchy is working in a good team is at the very top. That's like the best.
Right.
Working alone is second, and then working in a bad team is at the very bottom. So
You even
it
put it
depends
on
on the
you put it
team.
on the list. You put working on a bad team on the list.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could even do that. I feel like as soon as I get the hint it's bad, I run for the hills. I've
Yeah.
I've it's hard. I mean, it's hard to deal with, like, especially if everyone has the same job, right? Like everyone has the same skill but they want to do different jobs. Like it's hard to criticize someone else. I feel like when I've tried to work on teams, but I mean, I guess I'm just so new. I can't really figure out where I'd fit. So I'm just trying to learn everything right now, kind of become a jack of all trades.
Yeah,
But
I feel like that's very important when you're working in a team is that you know a little bit of everything, so you know what other people are doing, and you can um, maybe see if something's going wrong or something like that.
what role do you usually play when you go on a team? Like, I guess what do you
Um,
consider a role?
yeah, I
Warrior.
mean, the advantage is I in theory I can do everything, right? I can do graphics design, music, sound effects, coding, whatever. But usually when we work in a team, I usually do coding and game system design, balancing, that sort of stuff, because like that's what I'm good at.
Is there like
Yeah.
like a big community over there for game dev in Berlin?
Yeah. The game dev community in Berlin is pretty huge. They have pretty nice events every month where they all meet up, and yeah, not at the moment, of course,
Right.
but
Nothing's
yeah,
going on
it's
now.
a nice community. Yeah, lots of game jams.
You participate in a lot of game jams over there, like local game jams.
A few, like 2, 3 maybe while I was there. Yeah, not that many. A few.
So what do you think like the single most important skill for like a game developer would be? Or maybe
Like for a solo developer
right,
or
so like
for
for a solo developer, I feel like or like the maybe trait. Let's not say
Mhm.
skill, let's say trait.
Like I think the most important skill for a solo developer, if you like want to become financially independent, like it always depends on your goals, right? If you just want to make games for as a hobby or something like that, then it doesn't really matter. But
Right.
if you want to become financially independent, I would say the most important skill is being able to attract an audience or find an audience for your game. Making, or maybe even the other way around, making a game where it's easy to find an audience.
And what okay, so like
I
would you
mean, yeah, I mean,
yeah, I mean
it's
that's
pretty much as simple as that. If nobody's playing your game, then um, financially it's not gonna work. So
right. And
that is the most important skill: getting players to play your game. Yeah.
it's really hard to I feel like kind of settle that down. Like if you really want to become a game developer, it's kind of the shots are you have to really pick the right thing in order. But I mean, also if you throw a bunch of things at the wall, potentially something will stick. But I think you need to be able to take the time as well to like develop the game. You can't just kind of throw 50 things at the wall and try to sell those to people because
Mm.
people are going to see it's not really refined. So I
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Thomas Brush recently, and he had a very interesting approach on this as well, where he said, no matter what game you make, even no matter how bad your game is, if you look at the correct places, there's somebody out there who will like and enjoy your game. You just have to know where to find them. And I think that is true, but obviously you make looking for the people who like your game a lot easier if you just make a game that more people like.
no,
That way
definitely.
you don't have to look as hard, you know.
Would you
But I also find it calming to know that in theory there's probably an audience for every game out there if you just know how to reach that audience.
I mean, definitely. I think there's so many people in the world. It's kind of closed minded to say that no one will like your game. But at the same time,
Yeah.
if it's not a game, right? So like if it's kind of like scrapped together little pieces of mechanics, I feel like there's a limit to where like you just need to put a little bit more
Yeah.
time into it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
definitely if you're
True.
putting in the work and you're making like fun mechanics, semi fun. If it's fun to you, I feel like there's definitely going to be people who find it fun. I think that's a good rule.
Yeah, often it's tricky. Oftentimes it's you stop seeing the fun in your game after a while, especially if it's like a consumable game. If you make a game that has like a story or lives just purely off the atmosphere or something like that, then it becomes very tricky to judge your game after a while if it's good, and then you become very confused. Should I continue working on this? Should I not? It's very different when you work on a procedurally generated game on roguelikes, because those are obviously different every time, and those can stay fun even for the developers for a long time, which is nice as well.
Right. Did you
Um,
find yourself struggling with that with Will You Snail? Since it's like
yeah, for me, it's definitely very tricky to judge how fun that will be for other people, especially due to the high difficulty of the game. I honestly, when I play it, I still find it pretty fun, but um, a lot of times when I watch other people play it, I get a little worried that maybe it's a little too frustrating or something like that. I mean,
so what would you do?
that's why I do a lot of playtesting to hopefully smooth that out as much as possible. That's why I have difficulty settings. Like I'm obviously trying my best to fight those
Right.
problems,
I mean,
but you never really know as a
being too
developer.
hard isn't a bad thing either because like you can always lower the difficulty. Well, you have to figure out a way to do it, but like at least it's not some kind of core mechanic that's kind of broken. It's literally just the difficulty of the levels, right? So slowing
Yeah,
things down.
yeah. Sometimes the problem is not where it seems at first. For example, you could argue that maybe the difficulty isn't the problem, but the fact that people get stuck in a level and then don't want to continue playing, that is the problem. And yeah, if you don't really look at the problem deeply enough, then you might say it's the difficulty. But really, if you look at it closer, it's the fact that people get stuck, and getting stuck is just not fun. And obviously, for getting stuck, there are other solutions than just lowering the difficulty. For example, you could just make a less linear game where there are different ways to proceed. So if you can't proceed in one direction, players can still go somewhere else. Or maybe there are ways to level up your character to become stronger and eventually overcome those difficulty spikes. Like there are a lot of solutions as soon as you kind of see what the problem really is.
Right.
Yeah, but obviously, I think in Will You Snail, I probably realized a little late because, for example, if I want to do a non-linear level structure, it's kind of too late for that now.
Right, especially with like a platformer that's kind of like going through the. I mean, but there's always a way, right? Like Mario had added those kind of pipes and everything like that. I mean, I'm not saying add pipes, but there's definitely solutions that. I mean, I don't know if I'm not saying like you should do it, but I'm just saying there's always a way eventually if you really want to put in the extra work.
Yeah, there are solutions. Pretty much, the point I was trying to get at was just the earlier you realize certain problems, the better, because then you can fix them more easily.
Right, you can design the entire game around it instead of having to go back through every single level and see like, oh,
right.
this fit there. Oh, that would be insane to me. What's your favorite type of game to like genre of game to create?
To create, I've kind of liked the challenge of creating very different kind of games. So I think, for example, after making Will You Snail, I probably don't want to make another platformer for a while. And after making Islanders, I probably don't want to make another minimalistic puzzle strategy game for a while.
Right, so you're just kind of cycling through.
Yeah, I want to cycle it through, exactly, yeah. So it stays fresh.
Do you think
I probably have a slight tendency towards strategy games. I like strategy games. I like puzzle games. So maybe there's a slight tendency towards that. But in general, I try to cycle it through. Yeah.
So do you ever implement like networking on your games? Have you done that?
I've done it for a couple of mini games, a couple of small experiments, but never released anything with networking. Definitely on my bucket list, though. I definitely want to do that at some point.
What do you think stopping you, or what would you consider stopping you from doing that besides, I guess,
At
being
the moment,
consumed
at
by
the moment, what's stopping me is simply that I'm caught up in other projects and I don't want to start another one while I'm still working on Will You Snail.
Yeah. So that
before that, sorry, yeah, we have a little bit of delay here.
You're good. You're good. Continue.
Yeah, before that, what was stopping me was obviously knowing that it's a lot more effort to make a multiplayer game. And it's a lot trickier. Your chances of finishing the game are a lot lower if you don't know what you're getting yourself into. I feel like nowadays wouldn't be not that big of a problem because I more or less know what I'm getting myself into. I would just go for a very small scope and then slowly expand the game to kind of reduce the risk of me not finishing it. Yeah.
So when you start new kind of, I guess, new projects, or you're trying to implement new things that you've never done before, that's probably a good way, is like vertical slices or like kind of like prototyping, right? That's what you'd recommend.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kind of get everything down. Yeah, I've been doing this. This is the first month of my. I'm doing one game a month in a game jam kind of thing, picking different genres. So this one's third person shooter, and I decided to do a networking thing. I've never done it before. It is insane, dude. But I guess the benefit of having this one a month is I can learn that skill now, right? This month, it doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah. And I mean, as long as I've learned that, I feel like January has been a good month, right? It's a new skill to learn. So
that's probably the way I would do it as well. Just making some experiments first, and then once you understand the system, it's a lot easier to judge if you maybe want to do that again, or also to understand what is easy to do with a system like that, what is difficult to do.
Right.
And shooters are probably not that easy because timing is very important in shooters. So probably more on the difficult side of things, I would imagine.
Definitely. And then I'm like doing everything client side, so it's definitely hackable. Like, but I'm just trying to
Mm.
get it done at first. So like
Yeah,
anyone could make some kind
nice.
of cheat and just make yourself teleport around, I'm sure. But I don't know how to do that, but anyone, I'm sure they could. Just not having
Yeah,
validation.
it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, my Will You Snail playtesters sometimes just cheat themselves into certain levels. I never understand really how they do it as well, but apparently there are programs where you can just search through the computer memory and find certain variables of your game, for example, the x coordinate of your player, and just manipulate it. Because it's just a number sitting in memory. So
Wow.
you
Yeah.
basically have a program to find it, and then you can change it to whatever.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's I mean, everyone's always talking about how they want to make their games not hackable, but I feel like sometimes it's fun. I feel like I'm not a really like a good. I like to play around on hacking games sometimes, like when I'm very bored of a game. But I think it's pretty interesting to see how they can kind of change your game and do whatever they want. It's pretty cool. There was a YouTube channel of I think it's a guy that just does. He mainly does hacking, but he made a game where in order to win you have to hack the game. So it's like kind of like a spin on it. So that's pretty cool kind of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So what kind of games have you made so far? You're doing a multiplayer shooter game now. Like, what
Yeah.
were your previous projects?
So I've been one of those non-finishing, game warriors where I kind of start up a bunch of projects, which is kind of why I wanted to do this thing. Is what have I made? Kind of like a endless zombie third-person shooter, like not networking, just like zombie
Hmm.
shooter. I made a Flappy Donald clone, Flappy Donald Trump, just in the time for the election for him to lose. I thought maybe he could win, so that would blow up. But if it didn't, then that's just like worthless there. So. Um, but that was just like a day long project. A lot of my projects, I quit one where it was like a puzzle, floor is lava type game where you kind of like hop around. It's kind of like a 3D platform where you hop around, try to accomplish like
Mm.
levels. That was actually my first game that I started making, and I was just like, eh. And so now I kind of got more proficient with programming to the point where I'm making my own kind of scripts as opposed to just stealing them from people online or like tutorials. So that's where I'm kind of in this zone where
Mm.
I want to make content for my YouTube channel with this game jam, and then have these interviews, which actually teach me a lot every single time. So
Mm.
it's
Nice,
good.
nice. Yeah, sounds good. So you're basically in a learning phase, and I feel like you're definitely going about it in a smart way. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
afraid to commit to a big game. I think I'm treating it kind of like as if I were in like a college or university. Like you're not going
Mm.
to be like proficient enough to make like a big scale game within your first. I mean, maybe some people, but within my first year of even programming, I don't see it as even a chance to make something that I won't quit on. So that's why I'm taking this smaller scale approach.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really scared of starting, I feel like that's completely the right way to go for the start. But obviously, if that fear of starting a bigger project doesn't go away at some point, then what I would recommend is just building a bigger project out of vertical slices. Right, you can just make a small game, and then maybe if you like it, build a little bit on top of that.
That's a
And
that's a
just
that's a nice
just
method
yeah,
too. I think that's what
mm, yeah.
that's because I heard you say that about the networking thing. I think that's a really good idea. I think, and then another issue I have, which I mean, I don't really care anymore, but it was finding assets that work well together. That's a really difficult challenge
Mm,
for me. I'm not very proficient at graphic design, so like when it comes time to like design like a UI and then having models that look the same, it really takes me a lot. So I'm just trying to work through that right now as well, which I'm sure is not a big deal. Learning Blender also is helping with that, so like I can kind of edit whatever assets I can get as well.
our design is not an easy thing to master for sure. Like it's easy to put something together, but make it look nice. That is, I struggle with that a lot as well. It's very very hard. Like it takes years of practice. I can't do it.
Yeah, it's
I
hard to,
can't do
especially
that.
I feel like even just picking like the right colors that go well together, even with the
Yeah,
Adobe
yeah.
color palette, it some stuff just doesn't. Maybe I have my taste is a little off or something, but some of these color palettes just don't vibe with me. It's just like oh, it's hard to
No,
find
it's
like.
it's it's very hard. It's very hard. Yeah.
But I mean, I guess once you kind of pick something and go with it, and it doesn't really matter until people start giving you feedback. Then they'll eventually just tell you, hey, this should be, I think this color's a little less saturated than it should be, or this color should be red, telling you not to go on anything.
I mean, it's one of those things, once again, where the earlier you realize it, the less work it will be to change in the end. So it definitely makes sense to kind of figure your art style out early on, which I didn't really do with Will You Snail either. So another thing I'm completely messed up. Only now the art style is slowly sort of starting to come together, and even now it still doesn't look nearly as good as Islanders, because for Islanders we had a dedicated artist who's actually pretty good at this stuff. I'm not.
I mean,
it
looks nice, especially the particle effects and all that stuff. It looks like very, 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 very like unique. I feel like I haven't seen a game like that. And then the style of it, right, where like you're like the robot guy talking and telling you, like, I like the entire kind of concept of the game. It seems pretty cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like it's the style of Will You Snail is probably best described as fancy programmer art.
Yeah,
that's like, pretty much what it is. Yeah,
it reminds me of like some kind of like almost like the Matrix or something like that. Some kind of techno theater. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Because what I mean, usually programmer art is when you just use blocks and cubes, and there's very quick prototypes as graphics. I did pretty much the same thing, but just added a bunch of shaders on top, and now it looks somewhat acceptable. Yeah.
Do you so when it comes to shaders, right? That's like a skill on its own, but beyond like normal programming. Do you think you consider yourself proficient at like creating custom shaders and everything like that? Like
No.
So how do you go about?
Shaders are very, very powerful. I've barely dipped my toes into that, I would say, but I know them well enough that I can create a couple of effects maybe here and there where I need them when I need something. No, it's more like a on-demand thing where I have a solid knowledge base, and if I need something, I know where to look, basically.
Right. Yeah. That's how I mean I'm not even quite there yet, but I feel like it's such a entry barrier. It's so much math and then abstract thought of how will this affect this. What is it? I made like a bubble shader just by like I had to look it up, but just the amount of little nodes that went into that was just like I couldn't imagine like customly scripting that, but like the amount of nodes that went into that was just insane.
Yeah, I mean the difference between scripting something and nodes is usually honestly not that big, except for the fact that you, instead of dragging in the little nodes, you have to look up what the correct function is that basically does the same thing.
Right. Like yeah.
So yeah, but it's obviously a little more accessible. Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like a lot of game development skill just comes down to knowing where to look when you need something. Because I feel like that's something a lot of beginners get wrong. They think experienced developers kind of know everything and they just code everything right off their head. That's not really the case. It's more like after a while you learn where to look or where you can find certain information, and that way you get a lot faster and can just look it up real quick if you need it, and you obviously have the context you need to understand it relatively quickly.
Right. So you can kind of implement these custom features through doing stuff like that. And also I think a big thing that I've found in these past, like, I guess, couple months that I've been doing is you really need to be resilient when something breaks and kind of like figure out like you need your logical mind like in full steam, kind of working at this, because there's one line can just destroy everything and not throw an error, and there's like no catch, and you're just like, what's going on?
Yeah, it almost feels like a mini game sometimes. Find the bug.
I know.
And then in the end, it's often a giant plot twist. Haha. It wasn't where you were looking at all. It was that completely different thing.
And sometimes it takes hours. Yeah. I guess this leads me to what element of game dev is like the hardest for you to, or like did you struggle with the most, or do you struggle with the most,
Tricky. Probably art and appeal, creating appeal, because that is very I mean, my games look decent, but in order to get your games to a level where they sell purely based on their looks, which is a huge advantage, I really struggle to get there. Like, my art skills are just not good enough yet.
Yeah, well.
So it's a lot of struggle. It's a lot of experimentation back and forth. Friedemann, the artist of Islanders, luckily helps me out every now and then with this advice. So I'm getting there slowly, but it just takes a lot of time and patience. So that I would say that is the most difficult part for me, probably.
Do you ever use the asset store when it comes to art, or beyond? I guess maybe for prototypes, right? Or
No, it's not really a habit of mine to do that. I think it's okay. Like, you have to save time wherever you can as a developer. So being able to find assets and then modifying them in a way to make them fit the style of your game, that is not an easy skill either. It's
yeah,
something you have to practice and learn as well. But obviously, once you master that skill, you become a lot faster at making games. It's definitely worth it to learn that. Probably just the fact that for now I've never really made very complex games where I need a lot of 3D models or meshes or stuff like that. So I haven't really dipped my toes into that at the moment. Recently, when I started buying sound effects and stuff like that, just little stuff that saves me time and makes my stuff better, I realized that maybe I should do that more often. For example, for the top 5 ways to break Unity video, I got some assets from the asset store as well because I thought it'd make for a nicer looking video.
yeah. It looked
And
good. It
it did,
looked
and it did,
fancy.
yeah. Exactly. I didn't have to spend any time on that. It was just putting those assets in there, and I'm ready to go, which is obviously great.
And then when it comes to like, yeah, sound and music and everything that is a little bit less visual, right? It's a lot easier to find something that'll fit your game as opposed to like, because I feel like the visual stuff really has to have this certain style, otherwise it's like sticking out like a sore thumb. When it comes to
Yep.
music, you can find like
Yep.
game music. I mean, you have to, of course, you can buy some pretty good music, but it's a lot easier to find something that'll fit with your game as opposed to like,
Yeah, that's true. It's also very easy to, or relatively easy to make your own music, and I like making music, so I'll usually just do that myself whenever I can.
what do you use
Which
to?
is not
Oh, sorry.
it's not the most time efficient way to do it, but I like doing it. I use Cubase for making music, Cubase, but it doesn't really matter which program you use. You can use FL Studio, whatever. They're all the same.
Yeah,
Doesn't
yeah.
really make a big difference. Yeah.
I like to make music prior to making games, so I mean, I feel like all my music didn't sound like good music. It sounded like game music sometimes too. So like, it's hard for me. It's hard to pick the right instrument, and so that it's literally back to the graphic design issue where like I don't think maybe it's not really hard. Maybe it's literally like a personal issue with whatever I come up with, like kind of critical of myself. Who knows? But I think there's
Mm,
something to it.
I personally feel like a lot of people get too hung up in picking the correct instrument when making music. I'm usually just picks a random preset and then just more about making the melody work.
Yeah, the
But
notes are pretty
yeah,
important.
yeah, the instruments are important as well. Like the how they sound. Yeah, it matters. Yeah, I guess so. For maybe for the different presets, or if you use presets, then maybe it matters which sound program you use. But they thing is they all come with pretty decent presets.
Yeah, and a lot of them are pretty
Yeah,
similar, like kind of like a basic synth would come with. I mean, kind of the same thing. So making
yeah.
music is definitely a pretty fun thing to do. I think just having fun with game dev, like you don't have to dish everything out to everyone, right? So if you're having fun doing it, why not just do it? Unless you're extremely swamped with something.
Yeah, it's a little bit about self-awareness probably as well. If I mean, as I've said earlier, if you want to make this work as a financial thing, then obviously you have to be a little smart with your resources, and time is obviously a very precious resource as well. So if you know, okay, it will take me maybe 4 months to make good music for my game, then maybe don't do it. Then maybe just spend one afternoon searching for good music online and spend a couple of bucks on it. That might be the better solution
Yeah,
then.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, at least for the time being, too. If you find some more time, you can always go back and do it. But at least you
Mm,
have something there.
yeah. True.
I saw your video where you made that game move with your mind. I thought that was pretty cool. Even though like you didn't really enjoy that thing. Did you find
Oh
it
yeah,
difficult to program with that?
it was relatively easy to program with that. I mean, NextMind sent me one for free, so that's how I got in touch with the device. I thought it looked interesting, so I made a video about it. And yeah, it's easy to use in Unity. Like, they've made it relatively easy. Obviously, they have an interest in making it as easy as possible because people will only buy it if there are applications where you can use it. So they want to make it as easy and streamlined for developers as possible, which they did a decent job with that. But unfortunately, I feel like it has a lot of overlap with just an eye tracker. Like, the technology behind it is very impressive. You don't have anything on your screen that is tracking your eyes, but in terms of what it does, in terms of its functionality, it still does the same thing as an eye tracker.
Right.
So it feels more like
look at the thing and kind of
you have to look at the thing and then something happens. Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've never tried an eye tracker, but I almost feel like an eye tracker might even have less delay.
right.
You know?
Instant kind of feedback as opposed to like
Yeah.
trying to read your mind.
Right, yeah. So for the time being, I think an eye tracker will probably do the same thing, but better. But obviously, the technology is still new. Who knows? Maybe it will get better. And I still think it's a very fascinating toy to play around with. Like, at the moment, unfortunately, you can't read the raw data that comes from the sensors. I feel like that would be very interesting to play around with, see how the raw data looks like, see if we can maybe extract any other fun information from the raw data. But for the time being, that's unfortunately not possible at the moment.
Like mind reading. That's what you're what thoughts are you thinking now?
Yeah, you're probably not gonna figure that out from the outside, as long as we don't start putting the electrodes into the brain.
Right. I mean, I don't even know if they can do that
yes.
yet, but
Yeah.
that's pretty. I just thought that was such a unique device to see. I mean, yeah, I guess it's so new that is definitely not going to be perfect, and it did seem like kind of silly to have like the constant static, like looking things all over the whole screen.
Yeah, I mean, in their demos, in their demo application, they managed to do it in a way where it's like very subtle. You almost don't notice it. But then when I tried it myself, for some reason, I had to make it a lot stronger in order to work correctly. I feel like if you experiment with it a little more and know the ins and out of how the device really works, then probably you can make the flickering a lot more subtle. But it doesn't change the fact that you need some big buttons on the screen. And then I wonder, at the point where you have some big buttons on the screen, why don't you just click on them with your mouse? You know?
I think it's the novelty. That's what they're going for, is that novelty. But even the eye tracker, you're right. Like, you can look at the big button if you really wanted. If that was that's the whole thing, the hands free kind of game. I definitely think it made for like a cool video.
Made for a cool video. It's definitely impressive, and as I've said, I definitely don't want to bash them too much. It's impressive. It's fun. Like, it's a fun interaction. It feels interesting, right? Doing something with a mouse feels different than doing it with a trackball, even though they're basically the same input device.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about the NextMind devices as well, I guess, where you can do the same things you can do with a mouse, but it just feels a little different. And that of course holds some value as well, I guess.
So what was your worst experience you've ever had, like developing a game? Like the worst you felt, right?
Tricky. I mean, game development always has its ups and downs, and there are people who have bigger ups and downs. Like, usually it's the people who have higher ups also have bigger downs.
Lower downs, yeah.
Lower downs, yeah. And I feel like I'm one of the I'm a person where the highs aren't that high and the lows also aren't that low. So it's hard for me to judge.
So you just
one of the most stressful things was probably when I quit game school. I figured out, okay, I don't want to work in the games industry, or at the very least not in a bigger company. And then I started my YouTube channel, and at that point, like it was just very risky and probably not even all that smart in hindsight. Who knows? But yeah, that was scary. That was scary. So I didn't like that.
Right, like going on your own, kind of like a bird out of the nest
Yeah,
right there.
yeah. I feel a lot better now because now I mean things are going decently well. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not too worried at the moment. So.
that's good. Would you what kind of like shook you off of working at a game company?
I like doing everything, and in a games company, you just do one thing, pretty much. That's it. Like feel like working on a team of 3 or in a small team that definitely works for me as well because then I don't have to do some of the things I'm not good at, like art. I'm absolutely fine outsourcing or letting somebody else do the art for my games, and then I can just work on several different tasks where I feel like I can really shine, like coding and game design.
No, definitely. I
Yeah.
I was when I was looking at your portfolio or whatever, you showed like I guess your game design documents and all that stuff. Do you do that with every game that you like? Do you make design documents for every game that you create?
No, no. I think what you've probably seen in the on my portfolio are a couple of sketches, I guess,
Yeah.
for games or prototypes. Prototyping is definitely important. Trying out what you make before you do it. And there are a lot of best practices. Like you should really get a good idea of what you're gonna make before you start making it. Unfortunately, for some reason, I just didn't follow those best practices for Will You Snail at all. So I knew what the best practices were, but I just didn't do it for some reason. So that is, I hope that is a learning experience I'll remember next time and actually go through those best practices, do prototyping. Like it makes sense to figure out what exactly you're making, and prototypes are just a super fast way to figure that out by them. So there's really just no reason not to do that.
So for the
Yeah.
prototype, would you do like one like the first level, or would you literally try to implement kind of every mechanic that you can think of that you're going to include into the game into this zero level or whatever you call it?
Depends on which stage of the game development process you're in. Basically, at the very beginning of a project, what you're trying to figure out with the prototype is this fun? Can this be turned into an appeal? So basically, what you're trying to do with the prototype is just a proof of concept, and obviously, you're trying to add as little features as possible. Because if you have to add a lot of features just to make your prototype fun, that means it's probably already a little bit too complicated of an idea. Like if you find yourself in a position where you're like, that's not really fun yet, what can I add to make it more fun? Then just before you do that, just scrap the idea and try something else. Because that constant process of the game's not really fun, I need to add something to make it more fun, that is just a rabbit hole. Yeah,
I
you
can see
don't
that happening.
you'll get into that rabbit hole soon enough. When you're starting a new project, try to stay out of that rabbit hole for as long as possible.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah.
That's that sounds
So yeah,
insane.
prototype is for trying to find something that is fun, that's already fun in a very simple state, basically.
So,
And then you can also do visual prototypes where you just try to create a look in the game engine. It doesn't even have to be playable at all. You just try to create an art style in engine to see if you can pull that art style off and make it look nice. And it's actually important that you don't put any gameplay in there because then it slows you down a lot. At that point, you're basically building the game. Prototyping is about creating something very quickly. And if you want to try out an art style, it doesn't make sense to add gameplay. You're wasting your time, basically. So if you and then obviously the thing with prototyping is also you want to try different things. There's no point in making one prototype and then saying, yeah, I'm gonna make that game. The advantage of prototyping is that you can make a lot of that you can try a lot of different things. So you can try a lot of different art styles. You can try a lot of different game mechanics, variations of the same game mechanics, and that in the end will make for a way better game. So
yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I've never even
yeah.
honestly, I don't think I've heard anyone talk about visual prototyping. Like, I mean, it makes
Mm.
sense. I just never thought about it, and I've never heard people talk about it. So like, I think that's, and then beyond that, right? So like, let's say you make 4 or 5 of them for one game. You pick one, you still have 4 other ones for the future that you can kind of manipulate or add or change or put in another game. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
building a small portfolio in the same way.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
It's pretty
Every
cool.
prototype is also a little exercise, a little challenge to create something new, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my biggest regrets for Will You Snail because that's exactly what I did for Will You Snail. I basically made one prototype and said, "Oh yeah, that's fun. Let's make that game." And that was so dumb. Like, I mean, in the end, I guess I'm happy with my decision. I feel like it's a cool game either way, but who knows what would have happened if I spent a little more time experimenting and exploring different variations of the same concept.
Yeah. I mean,
would probably have made for a better game, to be honest. Yeah.
potentially. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I think just in the future, I guess, yeah, you could just focus on that. I don't. I'm at least at this point, I'm like I think of an idea and I try to get it done as fast as I can. So I mean, I think it's really useful to take the time. With what you explained, and kind of just like make 4 or 5 of similar games with different variations on it. I think that would be pretty interesting. Maybe you could even add some of those other mechanics and kind of make in the full game, right? So you'd already have kind of like a good idea. If you have 3 different fun games, maybe if you mix them together, it'd be super fun, right? Like a 3x3, whatever, like a multiplication kind of thing.
Yeah, obviously during development, prototyping still makes a lot of sense. But during development, prototyping sort of takes a little bit of a different role where during prototyping, what you're trying to figure out is, does this mechanic fit into the game? So you're just putting it together really, really quickly and messy. And then if it works, then you actually put it into the game in a clean way.
And so
but those are just ways to basically streamline your process and make it a little faster. So you don't do a bunch of work for nothing.
Yeah, you don't want to implement it on every level, and then you're like, this sucks. Take it all out.
Yeah, exactly.
When it comes to like the in-game prototyping, like during the development, do you have people test it, or do you test it yourself and just kind of make that cut or keep kind of decision?
There are different preferences, different approaches, and there are also different games that demand different approaches. Like I would argue that maybe for procedurally generated games, for roguelikes, you can do more testing yourself, but you always need some external testers for sure. And then for very linear, streamlined experiences where like you've seen that 100 times, so your personal reception can't really see the flaws in it anymore. The playtesters become even more important. But you should always give it to other people, probably. I don't see any scenarios where that doesn't make sense. Sometimes for some games you have to be careful not to burn through your playtesters too quickly. For example, puzzle games or any other sort of consumable games. Sometimes it gets really annoying where you let all of your friends play it and then suddenly you run out of people who haven't played it yet. But that usually doesn't happen that quickly. Yeah.
So when it comes to puzzle games, right? How do you get that? I guess that such a complex puzzle that's still solvable. Like this blows my mind. I've never tried to make one, but like it seems like whoever makes the puzzle game has to be able to solve every puzzle in order to make sure like it works, right?
Making a puzzle game is actually really fun. I really love making puzzle games because basically the way I go about it and the way I think you should go about it is you start with a system and you don't really start with an idea how a puzzle in that system would look like. And then you start with a very simple puzzle, and then you basically learn at the same pace that the player will learn later on when playing your game. So you explore a very simple idea in that system you came up with. Do you know Baba Is You, for example?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Or let's say Portal, for example.
Yeah.
The system in Portal is your first-person character, and you can shoot portals that you can walk through. If you enter one portal, you kind of come out of the other.
Right.
And what I would have done if I were a designer of Portal, I would start with a very simple puzzle, like basically the first thing that comes to my mind. there's a box you can't reach and you have to put it onto the button. And as you design those puzzles as a designer, you get better and better at understanding these puzzles. And that gives you more and more new ideas for what you could do with other puzzles. And then only when you really reach a point where you can't come up with any new puzzles, that's where you introduce a new game mechanic. So you just puzzle games are basically are constant, continuous tutorials for the player, and designing a puzzle game very much feels the same way to me, where even as a designer you just keep learning more and more about the system and can come up with better and better puzzles.
Yeah, so it really is like you have to master. You're basically mastering the game like as you go along. There's no like magic secret sauce where the most complex puzzle at the beginning, like how it works.
No, you can't design the most complex puzzle at the beginning. That's probably not a good idea. I mean, there are some puzzle games where you can cheat, where some puzzles, for example, are can be designed completely backwards. And that way you don't have to understand anything. You just have to design it backwards. You can.
Right,
like there are algorithms. You can some puzzles when there are not a lot of possibilities. Sometimes you can just write a brute force algorithm that tries every opportunity and then finds the solution for you or something like that. Like most puzzle games, I feel like most puzzle games don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think honestly the initial way that you said it seems pretty logical, and I mean it seems fun. It seems like you're actually playing the game as you create it, so it seems like it kind of adds this little element to it.
Yeah, obviously you'll be stuck way longer on every level than the player probably will, because sometimes basically after every puzzle you've solved, you as a designer you start in a completely empty room again, and you have to figure out what you put in that room, and usually figuring out what you put in that room just consists of putting some random stuff in, seeing if there's anything interesting there, and takes a lot of experimentation. But at some point you just randomly create something and you're like, oh, maybe I can get up there somehow, and then you do get up there somehow, and then I don't know, you can refine the puzzle a bit more, break it down, remove all of the unnecessary parts of the puzzles, etc., and then you end up with a new puzzle and repeat the process in the next room.
I guess a follow-up question would be, how do you ensure that it's more difficult than the previous level, right? Like how would you judge that? Because I mean, you want increasing difficulty per level. Like I feel like that makes much more sense.
You do that by you as a developer have to learn something new in every level, and the player will have to learn something new in every level, a new concept. For example, in Portal, the first concept you learn is, okay, you can walk through the portal and take objects with you. That is the first lesson the player learns, and that's probably also the first lesson the developers learned when they made the game. And then from there, maybe the next lesson the player learns is when you jump into a portal with momentum, you go out of the portal with a certain momentum. And I would argue that a good puzzle is only a good puzzle if it teaches you something new. And with you, I mean both the player as well as the developer. And if a puzzle doesn't teach you anything new, then it's probably doesn't belong into the game.
Right, so you're always not necessarily new features, but just adding kind of to the concept. Like the one feature is kind of going through the portals and everything, but they're adding kind of like concepts that you can
exactly, yeah. And then obviously at some point you'll run out of things you can teach the player, and that's where you introduce new mechanics. That's where you bring in maybe bridges that can go through the portals. That's where you bring in lasers that can go through the portals, etc., etc.
Oh wow! So yeah, just kind of evolving the game completely. It's pretty cool. Oh man.
Yeah. It's fun. I like it.
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on, Jonas. It was very good. We had a very good time. Thank you so much. Check out Will You Snail when it comes out. Check out Islanders. It's available on Steam right now.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say? Check out Jonas's YouTube channel as well. Sorry.
You've said it all now. Nothing more to add.
My bad, man. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you.